The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Colleen Doherty, and I am the Recruitment, Engagement, and Volunteerism Coordinator with NASPA. And today we have with us Dr. Katya Armistead. Dr. Armistead is the Assistant Vice Chancellor and Dean of Student Life at the University of California, Santa Barbara. She is the control point for the Student Life cluster that includes 10 student affairs departments. These include the Office of Student Life, orientation programs and parent services, campus advocacy, resources and education, the Resource Center for Sexual and Gender Diversity, the Women, Gender and Sexual Equity Center, Multicultural Center, Career Services, First Year and Graduate Student Initiatives, the Veteran and Military Services on campus, and the Dean of Students Office. She's led responsibility for campus protests and demonstrations, for campus crisis response and campus compliance in areas of policy related to sexual violence response, voter registration efforts, campus-based elections compliance, and federal and state mandates impacting student life, as well as Isla Vista safety issues. She is a certified trainer for the Leadership Challenge, teaches a leadership course in the Givers Graduate School of Education. She works on special projects, especially around campus climate and diversity. She is a member of the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs Executive Committee and a member of the Chancellor's Senior Officers Group. Dr. Armistead earned both her bachelor's degree in sociology in 1988 and her doctorate degree in educational leadership in 2012 from UC Santa Barbara. Thank you all so much for joining us today for her presentation, A Student Life Response to Gun Violence. I will be moderating the questions, which you can post in the questions tab on your GoToWebinar sidebar. I'll also be moderating the chat if there are any questions or comments being made in the chat. And as we're going along today, do feel free to post your questions and have some conversation in the chat. We will have time for questions at the end. If you have any questions for me, you can feel free to post those in there as well. And without further ado, I will be turning it over to Dr. Armistead.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This is my very first webinar, so bear with me, but I'm excited. I like to try new things, and this is definitely a new thing to give a presentation on a webinar. I can imagine that the title of this presentation is pretty off-putting. I mean, who wants to watch a webinar about gun violence? That sounds pretty depressing. I'm going to share the story of UCSB, what happened here on this campus. I'm going to start with the big picture and really hone in on the event that happened on our campus. And the main goal of this presentation is to talk about how I personally responded and the campus responded. I have it all written down, so I'll be reading a lot of it just so that I stay on track and capture the main points. I look forward to any questions that you have. I'm thinking that I'll do most of the questions at the end, but if there's any burning questions while I'm sharing the story, feel free to ask. So I'm not focusing on gun violence per se, but instead sharing the story of an incident of gun violence that happened here at UCSB. You may think that will never happen to you, but I'm here to tell you it can. It happened to me. May 23rd, 2014, a young man killed 6 UCSB students and then himself in a tragic act of gun violence. This act of violence, that includes stabbing as well, by the way, happened maybe within a matter of minutes, but it changed everything and rocked our world as we knew it at UCSB. To conceptualize, actually I'm going to show you a quick video. To conceptualize what happened at UCSB, we're going to watch the short video that features Michael Martinez after his son Christopher Michaels Martinez was killed in the May 23rd tragedy, and he's become a face for advocacy around gun control. So let me pull that up, just a short little video to give you a sense of, sorry.
Tracy Griffin live in Tucson, where the investigation continues to
9:41 this morning of a shooting at the Sandy Hook Elementary School. State
14 people dead, 50 injured in Aurora, Colorado right now.
Why did Chris die? Chris died because of craven, irresponsible politicians and the NRA. We don't have to live like this. Too many have died. We should say to ourselves, not one more. Thank you. That's it.
We'll make sure that Mr. Martinez's words reach every congressman, every senator, and every governor.
2 million people have already signed the pledge to end gun violence. It's part of a larger campaign to persuade political leaders across the country to take action to end gun violence.
I don't think any of us can truly feel the pain that they have had to endure. We can't bring back their loved ones, but we certainly can do something in their memory.
We are going to change America's culture of gun violence, one family, one law, and starting right now, one historic election at a time.
Everywhere that gun safety and gun reform were on the ballot, they won on Tuesday night.
The time is now. You must act.
I plan to share with you some lessons that I learned. That video still gets to me, by the way. And what the UCSB campus learned as a result of this incident and our campus response to it. There are many other stories and experiences to be shared from students, staff, and faculty, but this is the story from my lens, as at the time I was the Associate Dean of Student Life. I hope these lessons will be helpful, even beyond the act of gun violence. The 2013-14 academic year was a defining year for both the UCSB campus and for me, personally and professionally. The highly publicized incidents that unfolded during this year, even before our May 23rd tragedy, signaled the need for a culture shift for the campus. And my role and response to the year, especially during and after the May 23rd event, both crystallized my philosophy about working with students and allowed me to fully grow and develop my skills as a student affairs, student life professional. UCSB is a 4-year public research institution that is part of the 10-campus University of California system. We have just over 21,000 undergraduate students and 3,000 graduate students. We are about 100 miles north of Los Angeles and considered to be part of Southern California, although we are not far from the central coast of California. A little bit about me, my journey, since this is about careers in student affairs. My journey as a student affairs professional started as an undergraduate. I worked as a freshman at the Art Children's Center and then the last 3 years at Arts and Lectures. I received my bachelor's degree in sociology. My first professional job here at UCSB was as an administrative assistant in the Office of Admissions. I then, 3 years later, became the campus visit coordinator, which was my most favorite job ever, by the way. I loved bringing first-generation, low-income students of color to campus and tell them that this was just as much their campus as it was anyone else's. I then became the assistant director, visitor center director for admissions. I completed my master's in education and college student affairs from Azusa Pacific University. And then I was asked by a vice chancellor of student affairs to move over to the student life side because of my work with students. I became the assistant dean within the Office of Student Life. I figured it was time, as I was regularly badgered by the vice chancellor, to pursue my doctorate degree. I completed my EDD in educational leadership here at UCSB in 2012, and then I became the associate dean and director of the Office of Student Life. It was in the summer of 2014, after the May 23rd tragedy, I was named Dean of Student Life. I added the Assistant Vice Chancellor title just this last October. I met my husband at UCSB, and we have 2 children. This is Spencer. He's 25, and William is 21. Shameless plug, because they're my family. Okay. The 2013-14 academic year was especially challenging for UCSB. In the fall quarter, we dealt with student concerns and protests surrounding the appointment of the new UC president. We had 2 cases of meningitis, with 1 student losing his legs, and the CDC holding campus-wide vaccination clinics. An alum who was a veteran and student leader that I work closely with was arrested and charged with DUI and the killing of a young woman. He worked for our local congresswoman, and this attracted a lot of press. And in the winter quarter, the community was outraged by a gang rape of a student, which resulted in more negative press. We had a non-affiliate organization tabling on campus with aggressive anti-abortion views that greatly upset the campus community and led to a faculty member engaging in a highly publicized confrontation with the group. Vice Chancellor Michael Young responded with a letter, which the UCSB community appreciated, but he was chastised by outsiders who criticized UCSB's handling of the professor's actions. And then in early April, we faced what we would call a civil unrest during the annual Deltopia event, a non-sanctioned party in Isla Vista, which is our neighboring community right next to campus. It adjoins the campus, and many students live there. Again, we found ourselves in national news. I did not recognize my community. The sheriff's department brought out an armored vehicle and used rubber bullets and tear gas on the crowd. We responded to the Deltopia event by holding an informational session in Isla Vista with the Vice Chancellor, that's Michael Young right there, and administrators responding to questions. We did so on social media as well. It was a pretty dynamic event, and I'm very proud of the way we responded and handled what was a really stressful time. Then on May 23rd, the Friday before Memorial Day weekend, we experienced an act of gun violence. I was absolutely exhausted from the year, still recovering from the Deltopia incident in April, and was so looking forward to the 3-day weekend. At 9:30 p.m., my husband and I were just finishing our dinner and walking home when I received the first indication that something was wrong, a text from the Associate Dean, Don Lubach. Shortly after, I started hearing from students through texts and Facebook messages. I then started to hear from other student affairs colleagues. As soon as we got home, I started combing social media and asked my husband to jump on the police scanner. Through texts and phone calls with staff, we decided to convene on campus and assess the situation. We still were not clear what was going on. We heard from students that there was a car crash. We heard from others that there was gunfire. My colleague, Jackie Curta, who is our director of our alcohol and drug program, lived close to me and picked me up around 10 p.m. and we headed to campus. She asked me if I thought it would be okay to allow one of her staff members, Marjan, to meet us there, as she was not a senior staff member. My instinct was, heck yeah. She was a recent graduate and new student and had social media skills. In hindsight, this was a very good call. We got to campus and met up in our student resource building. We also call it the SRB. I remember entering the quiet building and thinking, what the hell do we do now? We met with colleagues, including the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, the Vice Chancellor of Administrative Services, the Director of Communications, the Director of Counseling and Psychological Services, also known as CAPS, the Senior Associate Dean of Student Affairs, and the Chief of Police. I'm sure a few others were there, but I don't recall who else was there. Feeling helpless, and with students wanting to know what was going on and what to do, Marjan, Don, and I began to respond through social media. The Senior Associate Dean and the Director of Communication began drafting official statements as information was coming in, but we knew that a more immediate response would be much more useful. So the 3 of us started disseminating information via Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit. We let students know when we learned that there was no longer a threat. We also let students know where we were so they could come to us if they wanted to talk to someone. So the first lesson that I want to share is it's a good idea to have a philosophy about using social media to push out information. It's the fastest and most responsive way to reach students. And students are already on social media, and rumors are already circulating, speculation's already happening, people are already afraid to death. So if administrators, myself as a student life person with help with other people, can push out some good information, that is so wanted by students. But it's good to have a philosophy about what that looks like, because you can get ahead of an event, you could push out wrong information. So it's a balancing act in terms of what you can push out. But if you can use the platform, that's where our students are. As we were sending out information and trying to ascertain what had happened, we came up with a game plan about having counselors ready to receive the first responders as they got off shift, and then setting up counseling triage for first thing in the morning. We headed home at 3 a.m. and agreed to be back on campus at 10 a.m. Saturday morning. I went home numb. I could not believe that 3 students had been shot and killed and several others were hospitalized. As I got undressed and crawled into bed, I just kept thinking that this was a nightmare and that I would wake up anytime. I woke up at 6 a.m. and noticed that I was receiving texts from the Director of Counseling and Psychological Services, or CAPS. She was basically asking me, what were we thinking about waiting until 10, and that we needed to get back to campus as soon as possible. I hurried to get ready, pausing to turn on the TV before I left. I was shocked to learn that overnight the death toll had risen from 3 to 6. The shooter had stabbed his 2 roommates and one of their friends to death before his shooting spree, which ended when he took his life, a 7th death. I threw on my clothes, rushed back to campus, and got there around 8 a.m. The psychologists, community volunteers who had arrived to receive the first responders, had just finished and met those of us who returned to campus. I then learned that at least one of the students killed was a member of a sorority. I walked through Isla Vista with the 2 psychologists to the chapter house to meet with their advisors and student leadership. It was an eerie feeling walking through Isla Vista. There was yellow police tape all over the place, media trucks sprawled all over our little town, and it was strangely quiet. On our walk, we learned that not 1, but 2 of the victims had been members of that sorority. Having to tell 60 young women that 2 of their sorority sisters were dead due to senseless gun violence was one of the most difficult things that I've ever had to do. On to my next lesson. I was not at all emotionally prepared for this scenario, but I was really glad that I'd had 2 counseling classes as part of my master's program. That it was very valuable to have practiced some counseling and my experience in the field. Saturday was a blur. I was still waiting to wake up from the nightmare after spending time with the women at the sorority house. I then headed back to the SRB. The SRB became the emergency response area. I decided to focus on all the texts, Facebook messages, and emails that I was receiving from students, staff, and community members. They all wanted to know what to do and how to help. And this comes to the next lesson. People want something to do. Leadership is important during this type of event, and figuring out how to organize people in a productive way is critical. I pulled in my colleague, Miles, the Associate Director of the Office of Student Life, to help me coordinate efforts to do something. We gathered all those who contacted us and were interested in organizing an event. We spent 3 hours together, about 10 to 15 of us, discussing, crying, and planning. It was an important part of the process towards healing. Giving people tasks and a purpose is a powerful tool. Not everyone knew someone that had been hurt or killed, but it was important that they become part of the healing process, to give them that peace. Once the details were finalized, we created a Facebook page asking people to collect as many candles as possible, and for staff and students to go into Isla Vista to invite people to the event. Over 5,000 people attended the candlelight vigil, and it was an incredible experience with only a few words, a performance by a compilation of a cappella groups of Amazing Grace, a silent march through campus to Isla Vista, and a time and space for reflection in the nearby park in Isla Vista. This ended up being one of the most amazing events I've ever been a part of. Together, we put it together quickly and organically, and it was largely driven by the students' vision for what they wanted it to look like. Monday. Mass news crews were everywhere. Instinctively, staff and students said very little to the press that swamped our campus in Isla Vista. News helicopters circled around overhead, and members of the press were assertive in trying to speak with and film visibly distressed students. Even though the members of the press are humans too, trying to get their job done, get interviews, this can be in direct opposition of your job to care for students. So another lesson was consider how to respond in a situation like this. Considering can be stressful already. So if you talk about how to respond to press in any kind of situation, it will make your life a little bit easier. I had no desire to speak to the press, and I think, as far as I know, most staff and administrators and faculty did not. Some students did, and they were still pretty guarded and very careful. And luckily, nothing backfired on us. But it's something to talk about and educate the community about for sure. Also on Monday, there was a walking protest of UCSB female students addressing violence against women. My colleague Miles and I monitored the protests and helped the Chancellor participate without being noticed by the media. The students led a group around Isla Vista, visiting all the areas where the many students were injured and 6 were killed. This was tricky because the students asked the Chancellor to join them, but they had also invited the media to follow them, and the Chancellor did not want to attract that kind of attention. We decided that Miles and I would meet the group and let them know that the Chancellor was in Isla Vista visiting some of the sites. Miles and I then met the Chancellor and his wife at one of the areas before the group arrived, laid down flowers, and took pictures. The Chancellor and his wife also had a chance to meet with families who had come to Isla Vista to be with their students. We put the pictures on the Facebook event page so that the women who organized the march could see that the Chancellor was supporting them. So the lesson here was to be responsive to students and try to find creative ways to say yes. We wanted to let the students know that the Chancellor was participating in their event and was supporting them, but we knew we couldn't put them with the Chancellor, with all the press, with all the dozens of cameras that were in their face. So this was a really safe way, and I think the students really appreciated that. Monday, also on Monday, we began working on the community memorial, which was to take place on Tuesday. Where the candlelight vigil was a perfect immediate response, it was now important to do something as a formal response from the campus. As we began to piece together a program, I met with those who helped with the vigil and expanded the group to include community faith leaders, including a practicing Buddhist to represent 3 of the slain students. I worked closely with the Chancellor and other administrators to design an appropriate program. Our UC president, Janet Napolitano, spoke first. Faculty members of the students that were killed wanted to speak, but rather than having to choose some and not others, we decided that the chair of the Academic Senate would speak to represent all the faculty. We had the Associated Students president speak on behalf of the student body, and the director of Greek Life speak on behalf of fraternity and sorority community because 2 of their members had been killed. The father of Christopher Martinez spoke on behalf of the families. We represented the campus's faith community by having 1 religious leader open the ceremony and 1 close it. As we were preparing for the memorial, we had another incident in Isla Vista, very close to campus, where a student accidentally had his gun go off and go through the wall into another apartment full of students. This was terrifying, and we did our best to take care of the students affected while not letting the incident become public. As soon as we heard about this, I immediately called the students and met with them to learn about what had happened. They'd already notified the police, and then I wanted to make sure that they had housing and access to counseling. The lesson from that, it's important to listen to students and allow them to plan their own event, like the candlelight vigil and the many following events that they organized. But it's also important that they hear from the campus leadership. We needed to host a deliberately planned event that considered all campus stakeholders, including the faculty, staff, and students, and families of the victims, and the outside community. The Tuesday memorial service was not only an opportunity for the campus community to grieve together, it was also a formal public response from UCSB to the tragedy that occurred in our midst. We had over 25,000 people attend that memorial. Also, well, a formal response is a must from the university to continue that same theme of a lesson. Something I don't have up, but also when the community is already in a fragile state, it's especially important to be patient and to do your best to not react. And that's what we had to do with that little incident in that apartment with the gun going off. We really had to keep our calm and address it and try not to freak out too much. And that was really hard because that was terrifying. Other students organized events, including the surf team paddle out. A graduate student repurposed a board on the center of campus on our arbor walkway, and people could leave. She bought pens and paint and created the board, and people could leave messages, which was very sweet. We have this board still on campus, in fact, as a memorial. There was also crane folding held by the Japanese Student Association, and so those were hung out. We also put together boards that were donated by Costco to Associated Students for people to leave messages to each lost student that were placed in Isla Vista. The board that was on campus was an immediate response. Melissa put that out pretty quickly. And then these boards that Associated Students obtained from Costco were a few days later, and that they were in Isla Vista versus 2 on campus. The community memorialized the victims throughout Isla Vista in the areas where the acts of violence took place. So you could just walk around in all these different areas and see these growing memorials. We put together information about coping with trauma and worked with Counseling and Psychological Services, CAPS. It became part of their website, and it was designed to advertising opportunities for healing. We ended up coining this website and pushing out information, Pathways to Healing. We created other events and called it Pathways to Healing, so people knew that there was a place to go to learn about what to do, how to cope, and how to support one another. A gaucho, or a group of students created a Show Your Gaucho Pride event on Facebook. This Facebook event received over 11,000 posts of gauchos from all over the world who posted pictures in their gaucho gear to show their pride. It was pretty incredible. Whenever I needed a pick-me-up, I would just go to this Facebook page and see the new pictures that have been posted. And literally from all over the world, we had UCSB graduates post pictures of themselves in their gear. The number of calls, emails, and Facebook messages we received was staggering. We heard from many of our colleagues throughout the system and from several other campuses offering condolences and support. Several campuses and the system-wide office provided support and mutual aid. We were grateful to those who came to Santa Barbara that delivered this support, especially our counseling psychologists. We had over 40 from different institutions come to help us, and we also had a lot of police officers, UC police officers from the other campuses come help us out. There was a vigil organized on every single UC campus following our tragedy, as well as many other campuses. Our community felt their compassion deeply. There was something so moving about going onto Facebook and seeing another campus having a candlelight vigil to think when they were thinking about us. After the memorial on Tuesday, we did our best to move forward and get back to normal, well, the new normal, and resume classes and work our way to get to graduation, which was only 3 weeks away. We held information sessions for staff, faculty, and teaching assistants about how to help students cope and how to cope themselves as they manage the last weeks of the academic year. We really leaned on those borrowed counselors and police officers. The members of the sorority that was affected had to have a tradition of passing along a handmade bracelet to recognize someone who has made a difference in their lives. And right before graduation, I was touched to receive this bracelet from a member of the sorority at their memorial gathering. I later passed it along to Assistant Dean Suzanne Perkin for her help with the memorial, and she continued the tradition by passing it along to someone else. So as a student life professional, I shamelessly used the event, everything that had gone on, to create or recreate or repurpose or reconceptualize traditions that were already happening and to create new traditions. Amongst the grief and confusion of the last weeks of the year, I found an opportunity to facilitate a cultural change to a tradition that had started on our campus a few years before, the Undie Run. This event happens the Wednesday of finals week at midnight, during which students run through Isla Vista and the campus library in their undies. They usually start in the library and then proceed into Isla Vista. I had been working on encouraging students to skip the run through the library and just do the Isla Vista part. And with the new sense of community, students were willing to avoid the library, all except for some seniors who thought it was their duty to carry on the library run, and went in that direction after they had done the run in Isla Vista, only to be met with numerous police cruisers and officers. We had so many UC police on loan from other campuses that they had helped staff the event and discouraged runners from entering the library. The look on the runners' faces when they got sight of the entrance to the library lined with police, they quickly turned around and made for the other direction. And it was funny because I kept telling them, you don't want to do that. No, really, you don't want to do that. And so it was priceless when they got there and saw all the police officers there. And to this day, I'm happy to report students are not running in the library anymore, which has made the librarian very happy. So, which leads to this lesson. Traditions are important. Look for opportunities to recognize them and maybe even to help facilitate positive change in them. So I have nothing against the Undie Run. I know this is a way for students to blow off steam. They have a great time. But when it interrupted the studying happening during finals in the library, that's when it was a problem. Now they start in the same place, which is Stork Tower, take off their clothes except for their underwear. The clothes are donated to a nonprofit organization. They run through Isla Vista and they stop just back onto campus in front of our student resource building or the SRB, and pizza's there for them. And that also helps discourage them from wanting to run across campus into the library. Summer work. I had accompanied the Chancellor during his visits to the 2 sorority houses that were targeted just after the tragedy. So the gunman had started at one sorority and nobody answered the door, and that's when he started just firing and hit 2 members of another sorority. So 2 sororities were greatly impacted because one was targeted and then 2 had lost their life because they happened to just be in that area. On one of the visits, a member suggested that we create a pledge about taking care of the community. I took the suggestion seriously and worked over the summer with a committee comprised mostly of student leaders to create the I Heart UCSB pledge. We designed an I Heart UCSB pin, the pledge card, and a campaign that was rolled out during the new school year. The pledge was then adopted for summer orientation, and we continue to look for opportunities to remind students of its importance. I also spent the summer working closely with students to think about how to approach the problem of large parties in Isla Vista and how to encourage students to keep things local rather than inviting their friends from out of town. I met with students for several weeks brainstorming on how to approach the new year. Fall quarter hit, and we started the school year with a surprise concert hosted by Associated Students Program Board with UCSB alum Jack Johnson. It was pretty cool. It was a beautiful way to kick off the school year and to reflect even as we began to move forward. The I Heart UCSB campaign was not the only new tradition. Halloween has traditionally been a time of rambunctious and dangerous partying, including many students from other schools. In addition to facilitating a group of student leaders to develop the pledge, I had also started this other committee to talk about how to respond to the large party weekends like Halloween and Deltopia. And so for Halloween 2014, Associated Students Program Board partnered with the campus, and this was huge because we didn't used to allow any events to happen on the weekend of Halloween or Deltopia. But through some facilitation and me working with the Chancellor's office and himself and student leadership from Program Board, we hosted a large concert in our event center for UCSB students, and it was for students only. This discouraged students from inviting friends from out of town and also offered an alternative to the parties in Isla Vista. I also worked with students to rent roller skates and host a skating party at our recreation center. And we also hosted a Game of Thrones marathon in our largest lecture hall, Campbell Hall, through the student course Magic Lantern through our IV Arts film class. That was really cool too. These events were wildly successful, and the parties in Isla Vista that weekend were the smallest in recent memory. Following on the success at Halloween, we offered similar alternative programming in the spring during the Deltopia weekend. These successful alternative events have become annual traditions and have expanded to include more programming to foster a sense of campus community without the dangerous and counterproductive partying in Isla Vista. So the lesson here, students want something to do. Working closely with students to solve problems not only allows for leadership development opportunities, but we are more likely to have buy-in from students. So as we moved through the year and got closer to the anniversary, we really had to start planning. The first anniversary of the tragedy was a really big deal. As May 2015 approached, I brought together student leaders from organizations like Student Government, Fraternity and Sorority Life, the SURF team, and anyone interested in hosting and supporting anniversary events. These meetings were cathartic, and it provided the opportunity for healing. Additionally, I worked with administrators to conceptualize university-sponsored events to remember and provide support for the community. Students worked with an art professor to create an installation called Blue Night, where blue lights were put on buildings around the campus and Isla Vista. Blue lights were also used during the student-hosted vigil on the anniversary of the shooting. Just as we did during and just after May 23rd, 2014, we used social media to bring students together to commemorate the first anniversary. We created a Facebook page to serve as a central listing for all of the campus commemorations of the anniversary. The page read, on May 23rd, 2014, the UCSB and Isla Vista community experienced a tragic loss. In the face of adversity, our community demonstrated tremendous strength and resilience. We came together in solidarity to reflect and heal with one another. We remember them. This year, let's come together to celebrate the lives of those we've lost in the spirit of our community. And some of the events that were hosted included, we had two of the fathers, Richard Martinez and Bob Weiss, come through our Multicultural Center, who put on a panel about turning tragedy into activism, why we got involved in the gun safety movement. In the local park, our registered campus organization, Active Minds, and Associated Students hosted an open mind, open mic event, a night of healing, expression, and unity. Our radio station, KCSB, held an open mic at our local pizza place. All talent welcome, spoken word, music, performance, comedy. Associated students at their center called Pardall Center in Isla Vista had a healing space. They had yoga, art, food, dog therapy, meditation, walks, and lots of different programming. A local pizza place, Pizza My Heart, had an Open Your Heart event for our campus security officers, our students who work for the police department, because they were working all the events. Our multicultural center also hosted a come together and evening of self-expression open mic night. And Associated Students Public Safety Commission sponsored a healing art space and an Ivy Chalk Memorial. Oh, and our College of Engineering, because 3 of the students, the roommates that were stabbed to death, were all in the College of Engineering. They had a gathering and to hold space for one another as they reflected on the lives of George, James, and David. In addition, our graduate student, Melissa, organized, put together, conceptualized, did so much work to create an exhibit in our red barn and older building on campus. The exhibit was called We Remember Them, Acts of Love and Compassion in Isla Vista. She and some students, she worked with a member of the sorority and other community members, gathered all the artifacts from all the different memorials, took in all the cards that were sent to the sororities, to the departments, gathered artifacts from the students that were killed, really captured all that had happened, put it, just collected it all, and then created this amazing exhibit for people to tour for several weeks. It went through several rooms, and the final room was a place where we had CAPS counselors to receive people who'd gone through the exhibit, to reflect, to relax, to get a drink, have a little food maybe. So it was very thoughtfully put together. And this experience, it changed Melissa's trajectory as a graduate student and what she studies. And she's actually become a national expert in how to work with communities who have been affected by gun violence. It's pretty incredible. Our surf team had another beautiful paddle out. And as we work to affect cultural change, faculty were encouraged to spend more time in Isla Vista. The art professor, Kim Yusuda, she's the one who helped with Blue Night, started along with staff and students First Fridays. And this First Friday provided local music, food, lights, and games for students to engage in on the first Fridays of the month. I worked closely with this alum, Jordan Kilbrew. He had started, he created the I Heart Isla Vista t-shirt and collected money to do some kind of memorial, and I connected him with the Isla Vista Parks and Rec manager, Rodney Gold, and we put together a little committee including Woodstock's Pizza and created Isla Vista Love and Remembrance Garden, and that was pretty special. And we had a community planting day, and then we opened the park and had a little commemoration on the anniversary of the event. Oops. This is some more pictures from Blue Night. That was a pretty spectacular event. Which leads me now to where are we today? The second anniversary, we had the choreographer who had created a dance performance to commemorate the 9/11 tragedy come visit our campus and teach our dance students that choreography, and they performed on the anniversary, and we had students, or the parents, come to that. We also started a scholarship in the name of each of the students that were killed and presented that scholarship to the students who were awarded them in front of the families. We also were focusing on Isla Vista, and we created a Meet Your Neighbors Day in Isla Vista, which was a really nice way to bring the community together in Isla Vista and to really remember that it's not just a place to party, but students live there, families live there, long-term tenants live there, there's businesses there. And then there was a whole conference that was created, the Isla Vista, the Beloved Community Conference. So some really amazing events came out of the tragedy and helped us rethink about what Isla Vista is all about, the relationship that there is with the campus. The campus has really stepped up and done a better job in embracing Isla Vista and recognizing that a lot of our community live there, whether they go to school, teach, or work here. We needed to take responsibility for it. I would say the county has taken a lot more responsibility for what's going on in Isla Vista. This is a flyer from, I think, year 3 to show that we still had several events. But by year 3, we were really letting the students take the lead and not do as many campus type events. We had crane folding. We had the second Isla Vista Beloved Community Conference. We had a panel discussion led by Melissa and other people who helped her create that exhibit and talk through that in our multicultural center. And the students organized a paddle out and a candlelight vigil that 3rd year. Here's a picture in our student resource building at SRB, our Japanese Student Association. The 3rd year had another crane folding event, and it still hangs in our SRB right now. It's very cool. And then these are some more things that happened throughout the year, showing the panel discussion about how we documented how Melissa collected all of the artifacts and the people that she worked with. And this was this last year that is the father of Christopher Martinez, Michael Martinez, talking about all the work that he has been doing around gun violence. And the Associated Students Safety Commission, Public Safety Commission, did an event where they collected backpacks. And those backpacks represent gun violence, all the gun violence that has happened since our 2014 tragedy. So they represent a school, a church, a location like Isla Vista, or I'm sorry, Las Vegas. So they were making a bigger statement about gun violence, and it was an opportunity for people to come together. And we're not doing as many big events around the shooting, but it was a nice opportunity to be in community, to really think about what had happened years before. So on this slide is, because I'm winding down to see if anybody has any questions, just recaps all the lessons that I shared during the reading of my experience. Going through them real quickly about having a philosophy on how to use social media to put out information, how it was really helpful to have some counseling classes as I progressed in my career in student affairs, especially in the student life arena. Realizing people just want something to do in the time of a tragedy or an event. And so even if it's just creating a candlelight vigil and looking for ways that students can participate and other community members, super important. Giving them tasks when we said, okay, this is what we're doing. We need as many candles as we can get. Sending people out on that, calling the churches, going downtown. Michael's donated all their candles. We had people go out into Isla Vista, door to door, to let them know that the candlelight vigil was happening. We have Spanish speakers that live in Isla Vista, so we looked to find out who are the Spanish speakers. Can you go to their homes? And then thinking about how to respond to the press, practicing that message. Who do you get permission from if you want to actually respond? Having a philosophy around that was super helpful, which we didn't necessarily have, but we have talked about it since. Being responsive to students and try to find creative ways to get to yes for them, to support them in their events, but not compromise yourself or the chancellor. Having a formal response from the university, like having our memorial in our Harder Stadium, was absolutely important. And when you're recognized when there is something going on, your campus is already in a fragile state, to try to stay calm and handle it the best that you can without making a big deal out of it so people don't overreact. And I'll give you another example of that. Right before school started, we had, during Week of Welcome, there was a Facebook post about a pistol in Isla Vista, and all our sorority houses immediately went on lockdown and were scared to death. And it was a false post, but it freaked everybody out. And even today, 4 years later, any talk of gun violence in our community freaks everybody out. Students want something to do. Working closely with students to solve problems allows for leadership development opportunities, and you're more likely to get buy-in from students. And then finally, in reflection, my role as a student affairs professional and Dean of Student Life is largely defined by students leading me and how I can be a service to them in the institution. And that year is really where I honed in on that philosophy and realized what my role is. Whew, okay. Thank you all who listened. I hope that I was able to impart some of the lessons that I learned, and I am open to any questions if anybody has any questions. And maybe you don't, maybe you're just like, wow, that's a lot. Know that so much was going on at the time. This is just through my lens. This was my experience. Faculty had to get back into the class and figure out how to talk to their students. Resident assistants, associate, or resident directors and associate resident directors had to figure out how to work with their students. Everybody was on edge. Everybody was confused. Everybody was hurting. There was a lot going on. Miles Ashlock did an inventory on how the event affected every department in student affairs, thinking, oh, it was just a few. Every single department was affected. Our disabled students program, their numbers increased in those who needed support. Campus learning assistance services, our tutoring services, more students needed help getting through the rest of their classes. Faculty were given the option to just finish their class with the grade students had, or, you know, do finals early, all of that stuff. So a lot, it affected everybody on campus.
Dr. Armistead, we don't have a question right now, but we do have a comment from a former student of yours, who is actually how we got connected. So thank you to Betsabel Martinez, who is an alum of UCSB and connected Dr. Armistead and I. And Betsabel says, thank you so much, Katya. This was reflective as a UCSB alum, and I am so proud of the UCSB community and blessed that there are essay pros like yourself on our campuses.
Aww.
Oh, and oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying thank you.
So we do have a question from Roxanne Del Rio, and her question is, was there a lot of collaboration with campus police in the immediate response?
Absolutely. You know, if there were any differences with any groups of people or communities, those were all out the window. You know, students grumbling about police and the sheriff's department that's in Isla Vista, all of that. And that was happening because of what happened with Deltopia. Everything changed. Everything changed. People came together like you couldn't even imagine. And students even created this huge banner that they posted outside our sheriff's department. It's called Isla Vista Foot Patrol, thanking them for their response. I don't know if I said this at some point, but as a student life professional, it's also really helpful to know your police officers, know them by the name, by sight, to to know pretty much the campus community and who are the players in the neighboring town, because then when you just need to get things done, it makes it a lot easier to get things done. When I was starting to work on the big memorial, I called the director of instructional resources about sound for our Harder Stadium, which is an older stadium and doesn't have great sound or anything. And I just said, I picked up the phone, I had his cell phone number, and I said, J.O., I need your help. We need to host 20,000 people in Harder Stadium, and they need to be able to hear what's going on. And he said, done. And he, we didn't have that capacity on campus, and he went to used all of his resources to outfit Harder Stadium for that very large 25,000 person memorial. And it was like that in everything that I did. We need flowers. We need this. We need music. Everybody rose to the occasion. It was incredible.
Well, on that note, I would like to thank you so much, Dr. Armistead, for presenting today. Thank you for taking the time out of your day and putting this presentation together. I know how difficult it can be to relive these experiences, but we appreciate your sharing those experiences with us as a professional. For everyone who is still on the call, throughout the rest of the month of October for Careers and Student Affairs Month, there will be additional free webinars available from NASPA. The next webinar will be next Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time from Dr. Kevin Kruger, who was NASPA's president, and Dr. Penny Rue, who is the NASPA board chair, on the current state of student affairs. You can go to the NASPA website, the Careers and Student Affairs Month page, to find the link to that webinar and register there. Thank you once again so much, Dr. Armistead, for your time today, and we look forward to seeing everyone at the rest of our webinars this month.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. It was hard, but it was a pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon.